If you, the question goes, if you are advising Sri Lanka on forex management and debt sustainability, what would your advice be to the government of Sri Lanka?
That's a tough question. And I'm sure that there are many experts in Sri Lanka who already know the answer to this question. So I can only add what Thea was saying, that I think realism is required. And it is not possible, especially with private lenders, to go beyond what the market will bear. And I think this kind of international market realism is something that countries often have difficulty dealing with. But the faster they deal with it, this is a bit like not being well and recognizing that you're not well and getting the right medical attention as quickly as possible. I think you all know the answer, that unless Sri Lanka is able to move ahead with its very bright future, given its special strategic location, given the highest income in the region, given its human capital assets and its natural assets, it has a great potential. But in order to reach that potential, one has to simply get over the hump of the debt crisis and alongside with it the fiscal crisis. And some hard decisions have to be taken. The faster they are taken, whether it's to the IMF, whether it's some other debt restructuring or debt service suspension activities, the easier it becomes to resume activity. And for all players, the financial sector in particular, but also industry and services and agriculture, to begin the recovery process and move on to a much brighter future. So I think the longer you delay it, the harder it gets. And I realize politically it's not easy to do. But as we have seen country after country, taking the hard decisions, as long as they are transparent, as long as they are well explained, as long as bodies like the ICC and others convey the messages that are required, you actually manage to make progress very rapidly. And the experience, certainly in our region also, suggests that when financial restructuring programs are dealt with face forward and looking at it in a kind of realistic way, progress is made.
Thank you. I don't know whether it's right. Dr. Shah, one more quick question to you.
Sure.
Yeah. I don't know whether it's fair asking you this question, but the question goes, with such a huge trade deficit, going forward, what should our import strategy be?
Currently, of course, you are dealing with a foreign exchange issue, and the import controls that have been imposed were perhaps necessary. But looking to the medium term, history has taught us that no country which puts on protective barriers is able to make progress. Competitiveness has to be the leitmotif of a small island country like Sri Lanka. It has to take advantage of its human resources, its natural resources, and its positioning in the Indian Ocean. And this requires it to, in a world where supply chains are really the only way industry and manufacturing, and including services, are moving forward, it's almost impossible to be protective, because when you protect imports, or when you restrict imports, you're restricting your exports as well, because of the supply chain nature of business. And because of the automation that many of us have talked about on this panel that is coming, the faster you are able to be a central part of that supply chain, I think the easier it is to deal with these issues on the trade policy. Sri Lanka really should aspire to be the Dubai of the Indian Ocean. It should really aspire to have that kind. The aspiration should be that it should be an entrepot that is at the sort of cutting edge of a lot of these kinds of services And as many of people have spoken here, the IT sector clearly is an important area, but startups generally have a great future, especially in the IT sector. And I think this is an area where, again, the nature of trade policy is important. Open frontiers are really important. So I would suggest that yes, deal with the debt crisis, but then please move on to a much more open trade environment in Sri Lanka. That is its great advantage. We should not lose that advantage.
Right. One quick comment on education reform.
Sri Lanka already is at the forefront of literacy and the kind of approaches that it has taken over the years. But it has to do a lot of catch up in terms of more advanced skills. And the advantages that it might have had in the past with the kind of low-wage labor and skills is going to erode rapidly. So we do need to think about the ways in which Sri Lankans can perhaps acquire these skills both within Sri Lanka using digital education methods, long-distance education methods, which certainly have come into great prominence with the pandemic. So that there is an opportunity here for skilling up rapidly to be able to meet competitiveness issues around the world and using, again, digital technology to do this. This requires universities, this requires associations like yours to be promoting this kind of human capital accumulation.
Thank you, Dr. Shah.